Good afternoon, everyone. How are we? I'd like to thank you for allowing me to come out. Our first Friday, we do our lunch and learn. Unfortunately, the chief had a prior obligation that conflicted with this, so he sent me in his place. Hopefully, I will do as a replacement without any issue. I can tell you he's meeting one of his obligations that he made to the town when he took the job. He is actually moving closer to town, so it's a moving weekend for him. He beat the 90 degrees, but it's still going to be a hot one, so we'll see how he looks on Monday. Just to keep you up to date with what he usually does with what we got going on, did you guys enjoy the heat? We want to thank everybody that worked with us. We had the cooling centers were open; they were available. We did get a call. We were able to help some people out, and as always, with the continued weather pattern, with the hottest July on record, we will have those open every weekend and after hours as well. Just reach out to our dispatcher, and we can get those doors open and get transportation if need be. Other stuff that we have going on is, unfortunately, our building had a lightning issue during that last storm. We lost some cameras, so we're in the process of trying to replace those and get those back up and running. But we are still fully functional. We lost our internet exchange capability. You can exchange items in our parking lot safely. We just they're not videotaped for a short time period, but we're going to get that taken care of quickly. In other news, the town graciously voted to allow us to replace a cruiser. We're in the process of doing that, so you should actually see that on the streets probably in the next month or so. It's at Colonial Ford out in Plymouth. They're currently building it. It's on the assembly line. We expect to have it here, lettered, and all ready to go probably the next 3 to 4 weeks. So that'll be available to be seen, but it'll be also out there helping the officers get around the patrol sectors and make sure we're able to provide the best service we can to you guys as well. One of our bigger items that we have coming up this weekend is the Pan Mass Challenge. I'm sure you've all heard of it. It's approximately 5,000 bicyclists that are going to be riding from Sturbridge, Mass. to Provincetown, Mass. It's a 2-day event, and good old Uxbridge gets to be part of the first day. So about 6 a.m., the north end of town is going to become compromised for about 3.5 hours. It takes them from about 6:30 till about 9:30 to get through Uxbridge. So the 122 and the Hartford Ave intersections is going to be extremely heavily congested. We are going to try to give the bicyclists a right-of-way for the entire time. We'll move traffic when we can safely. But if you do have to be out and about tomorrow morning, we strongly request that you either plan accordingly, that you're going to be sitting for a while, or wait till after 9 o'clock, and then they've moved on and they're well towards the Cape at that point, so it's no longer a major issue for us. Other than that, we continue to move along. We continue to staff our patrols and make sure that everything's out there, that we're seeing, that we're handling everything that comes our way. And we're also fighting the heat, so we're right there with you. Those of you with phones and that love those annoying robocalls and those annoying scammers, our guest today has actually taken a step to help defeat them. Congressman McGovern introduced a bill to shoot down the robocalls, and it looks like it's got a lot of momentum. So without further ado, Congressman McGovern.
Well, thank you, Sergeant. And can you all hear me okay? Good. Well, let me just say I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for the invitation. And I know the chief's not here, but I want to thank him because he's the mastermind behind these, I think, monthly lunches where you lunch and learn. So I appreciate the opportunity to be part of that. I also want to recognize our Board of Select person, Susan Franz, who is here, and appreciate all the great work she does for this community. And I'm so happy to be here and out of Washington. As you know, nothing's happening in Washington. It's all calm and there's nothing controversial going on. So being back here, you know, that's where all the excitement is. But we are now in our summer break. which is the month of August, and it is a time for people like me to kind of get around. And the last 2 days I've actually spent crisscrossing my district, which goes from basically here all the way to the Pioneer Valley out to Northampton and Green. And I bring with me, state and federal officials who deal with agriculture to see whether we can be of any assistance to some of our local farmers. I'm a big believer that agriculture is an important part of our economy, and it is something that we need to support locally. And so every chance I get, I tell everybody, please buy local. Go to farm stands, go visit farms. Tell everybody else to buy locally. We need to support our farmers who really struggle because it's a lot of work to farm the land, and you don't make a lot of money farming the land. But one of the issues that people brought up to me was the issue of climate change. And we all talk about climate change, and some people think it's this abstract issue that you talk about in academic settings. But farmer after farmer told me about how difficult it is to farm given the unpredictability of the weather, given the intense heat and the intensity of storms. I visited a farm out in Rutland called Sap Castle. They produce maple syrup. But because the winters are warmer, in essence, they're afraid that in 10 years from now, or 15 years from now, they won't be able to produce as much maple syrup from the trees here, that the industry will move up north, and they're concerned about that. I was at a farm in Amherst yesterday, and they were telling me that a lot of these invasive species that destroy plants and all these diseases, when the winter comes, they used to just die, and now they don't. And so it becomes even more difficult to protect crops from disease and invasive species. People talk about flooding and about a whole range of issues. And I just bring this up because at some point we have to get serious about dealing with the issue. And we have to get more serious about committing ourselves to greener, clean, renewable energy. We have to make sure that we have incentives and we take the initiative to make sure everybody's got good insulation in their house, in their homes. We need to support and encourage good farming practices. In Massachusetts, farmers actually are a model on how you should farm. So in any event, and so I'm here today, and then I've got a whole bunch of other stuff I'm doing for the remainder of the break. But I thought that rather than me kind of ramble on, that this is your chance to grill your congressman. I'd rather talk about the topics that are on your mind, or address some of the concerns that you have about what's happening in Washington and around the country. If that's okay with you, I think that's a better way to proceed. If you have a question, raise your hand, and I'm happy to answer it. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you have different points of view. I've just finished 15 town halls across the district, and I realize that I'm not universally loved. But I learn a lot. I learn a lot from not only those who agree with me, I learn a lot from those who have different points of view. So we'll talk about whatever's on your mind, any topic, any concern. Just raise your hand.
Okay.
And I'll repeat the question.
Now, what can we do about these annoying robocalls? You passed a bill to eliminate them?
What can we do about these annoying robocalls? We in the House actually passed a bill that restricts these robocalls, that forces these phone companies to take stronger action to prevent them. I mean, I don't know about you, but I get calls all the time, and the number that comes up on my phone looks similar to the numbers of my kids or my wife. Yeah, and I pick it up, and it's like, hi, this is Joe's carpet cleaner.
Yep.
Or hi, this is Frank's chimney sweep. But even more concerning to me are the calls that people are getting that say, hi, this is the IRS. And you owe taxes, and you're going to be arrested if you don't straighten them out. Call this number. Let me just tell you this. The IRS will never call you on the telephone.
I called it.
Right. But I've had people come to my office who have been taken in by that scam, and they've given their credit card numbers, and it's a mess. Whenever there's a question until we can deal with these robocalls, we need the Senate and we need to pass a bill and we need the President to sign it. But until we get there, when in doubt, talk to somebody here at the Senior Center, or talk to somebody in your family just to make sure that you're not being scammed. My own mother, I got a call about consolidating credit card debt, and she thought it was like, oh, why not? Well, it ended up that she gave them more information than she should have, including her credit card information, which they didn't have, and they began to actually charge her credit card. Luckily, we found out about it quickly, and her son is a congressman, and I got on the phone and I intervened with the bank and everything to stop the scam. But the bottom line is, for some people, it's too late. So don't trust any of these calls you get on your phone. And we're trying to take action in Washington. We just passed something in the House. We're hoping the Senate will do it, and I'm hoping in the next few months we'll have some good news about that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Social Security.
Social Security.
Yeah, is it gonna be reduced?
Is it going to be reduced? I hope not. I don't want it to be reduced at all. The deal is that, and here's the deal about Social Security. We had this philosophical debate in Washington about Social Security. Some people don't like Social Security because it's a government program. And you have some members of Congress who say we should privatize it. Invest in the stock market. Now let me tell you something. If we had done that, a few years ago when the stock market crashed, everything would have been gone. Social Security should be a guarantee. People paid into it. They should be there for them. And so there is a challenge now about whether Social Security will be solvent well into the future. And we're going to have to address that. But the way we should address it is not by reducing benefits. Because, to be honest with you, you can't really live on Social Security alone. I mean, if you're relying only on Social Security, you have a lot of people who work their entire life, who don't have a pension, who just rely on Social Security, and they're living in poverty. They can barely make ends meet. They're struggling. They're going without meals. They're skipping on their medication. That's just not right in this country. So if we want to keep Social Security solvent, maybe we need to be thinking a little bit out of the box. For example, I may be off by a few $1,000s here, but right now, the way it is determined what you pay in Social Security taxes is based on the first $110,000 of your income. So if you make $60,000 a year, or $40,000 a year, that entire amount is used to determine how much you pay in Social Security taxes. If you make $110,000 a year, that entire amount is used to determine how much you pay in Social Security taxes. If you are a millionaire or a billionaire, it is the first $110,000 that is determined how much you pay. Well, if you're a billionaire, you can afford to pay a little bit more. If you're a multimillionaire, you can afford to pay a little bit more if it means keeping Social Security solvent. And I think if we could adjust how we pay for it, and if we can, bring it up to into a more kind of progressive standard in terms of taxation, not only can we keep Social Security solvent, we should be talking about giving people a raise who are on Social Security. And that's where the focus ought to be. So when people tell you, oh, Social Security's in trouble, we need to cut your benefits, and the response ought to be, there are other things that you are paying for, including a tax cut for millionaires and billionaires that has added $2 trillion to our deficit. You should have instead focused attention on giving people who are struggling only on Social Security a raise. That is what I am focused on. So I don't think there'll be a cut in Social Security, certainly not in the next year and a half. But, it all depends on who's president, it all depends on who's in Congress, and we go from there. But Social Security is probably the most successful social program in the history of our country. And we shouldn't mess around with it. We should strengthen it. Has government siphoned money off of the Social Security fund? I think over the years it has.
Right. So
they owe us that money. Yeah, the bottom line is if Social Security were put in a lockbox, essentially, from the time that it was conceived to now, I think we would be in a better situation than we are right now. But the bottom line is it wasn't. And most money that you pay in taxes that it should be going specifically and only to a certain thing over the years the money has been kind of messed around with. So yeah, I mean, but the bottom line is we have to find a way to replace the money. We have to find a way to make sure that people who have paid into the system all their lives are not, the way Social Security has been managed. And I think that's the goal here. And there's a way to do it. It all comes down to if it's important, if it's a priority, and I think it is. And I have too many people who live almost exclusively on the Social Security check. Yeah. Right. Right. Well, yeah. So every time you get a raise and you have a little bit more money, then the formula for Medicare goes up, it kicks in, and you get whatever raise you get, it goes there. What we need to do is we need to recalculate how we calculate the cost of living in this country. The bottom line is that for senior citizens, you have additional costs as you get older. Healthcare costs, Medicare, medical bills, prescription drugs and stuff like that. The standard ought to be adjusted to reflect that. And there's some talk about trying to do that. But that is something that we have to get whoever is the president to lead on, and I'm not sure that's where he is right now on that. But that's one of the things that we need to do. The other thing is, look on healthcare in general. We need to have a conversation about how we change things. I mean, I'm going to tell you, if you were designing a healthcare system from scratch today, you wouldn't design the system that we have. Where you have insurance companies that are for-profit entities that want to make a lot of money for their shareholders and for their CEOs, when in fact the focus of healthcare ought to be on making sure people have access to good quality, affordable care. And there's a lot of debate about how we should do that. We all have ideas. But one of the things that we ought to be able to do right now is pass a bill that gives Medicare the ability to negotiate drug prices for Medicare recipients. So the VA does that. Those who get their care from the VA, your prescription drugs are at a lower cost. It is because the VA can negotiate on behalf of all the millions of veterans in this country, and they can get lower and better drug prices. Well, why don't we give Medicare that power for all the millions of people on Medicare? I mean, you can lower your prescription drug costs drastically if we had that power. And we tried to do that in the past. The big pharmaceutical companies came in and they fought back and they dumped gazillions of dollars in there. But these prescription drugs don't mean anything if you can't afford them. And I've talked to too many doctors, emergency room doctors, who tell me that you have senior citizens who are being told to take their medication with a meal, but they don't have the resources to afford both the meal and their prescriptions. They're taking them on an empty stomach and ending up in the emergency room. I mean, that's just crazy. That doesn't have to be. We ought to be able to fix that, and we ought to have the guts to stand up to the pharmaceutical companies and say enough. Let me just say one thing. I was visited a couple of months ago by a group of parents whose kids have diabetes, right? And they came in with all their bills. And they said to me, look, insulin is not a new drug. It's been around forever. Why is it so expensive? Why does it continue to go up? There's no need for it to go up. Well, the only reason why it can go up is because, we haven't made it illegal for the pharmaceutical companies to gouge people who rely on insulin. You can buy the same insulin in Canada, for a fraction of the price you pay here. Yeah, it is. It's nuts. So one of the focuses in Congress needs to be on controlling the cost of prescription drugs. I mean, we're going to have the debate on overall health care, but at a minimum, we ought to be able to focus in on prescription drugs. And by the way, everybody is affected by the cost of prescription drugs. Seniors, young kids, people in the middle age, everybody. And we ought to be able to come together and say, here are the ground rules. And yeah, we understand that big pharmaceutical companies, who come up with breakthrough drugs ought to make a decent profit if that's the way our system is going to be. But you don't need to make a killing. And the bottom line is you ought not to put a drug on the market that is so expensive that it causes people to go bankrupt. And so we can fix this. This is doable. This is the one thing that I hope can bring Republicans and Democrats together, and we might be able to do something in the next year. Yeah. So could I address the issue that some people are disgusted with politics and choose not to vote at all? Let me just say this. I understand the feeling. I was on an airplane a couple of months ago. I had to give a speech in New York City, and the plane had been delayed, and so I didn't get on the plane until like 11 o'clock at night. And the woman across the aisle said to me, you look familiar. And I told her, I'm in Congress, I represent the 2nd District of Massachusetts. She said, yeah, no, I think I've seen you. I want to tell you something. My routine, my daily routine used to be I get up in the morning, I turn on the TV news, I make breakfast for my kids, send them off to school, I get ready, go to work, put on the radio in the car, listen to the news, and then I go to work. She says, my new routine is I wake up in the morning, I don't turn the TV on. I make breakfast, I send my kids to school, and then I go to work and I listen to classical music. She said, because what is happening is so disturbing to me that I feel I'm cranky all day when I listen to the news. And she said, so I've kind of pulled the shade. I said, I think I've had enough. And I said to her, I understand that. I mean, there are days when I want to, bang my head up against a brick wall. But here's the deal. If you pull the shade, if you step back, if you don't vote, then you have no voice. Because there are people out there, who may not have your interests at heart, who will show up and vote, and who will elect people who will actually embrace policies that may make your life more difficult. I mean, the vote is a sacred thing. And I get it. Sometimes we get people in office who drive you crazy. But, you have the ability to change that. And I tell people all the time that, when we talk about politics, sometimes we talk about it in such general terms that we think we're powerless. Well, in this room here right now is a mini movement. I mean, you can, if this number of people showed up to a Board of Selectmen meeting in Uxbridge, you would have a lot of power on an issue. If you showed up at the State House, there's no way any state legislator could ignore you. And similarly in Washington. And, and when some people say, well, no one will listen to me in Washington. Well, part of the deal is, your vote will send a signal. You can write letters, you can email, all that kind of stuff. But the other thing is, if we want to change this country, it begins in our own communities. It begins with our own families. I mean, I have a new rule. I've told this to my mother. She doesn't like it. But when we have family functions, and my cousin comes and says things that I know are wrong, I used to just go in the other room or pour another glass of wine, right? I don't do that anymore. I mean, I actually engage him and say, you are wrong. And I try to set the record straight. And the reason why I do that is because if I don't, my kids are there. I mean, if I don't say anything, my kids are think, "Wow, he's right." I go to Dunkin' Donuts every morning to get a cup of coffee. If you go to Dunkin' Donuts between 7 and 8 in the morning, usually there's usually about 10 old guys in the back solving the world's problems, right? And I mean, I used to go to Dunkin' Donuts, so when people would say things, I wave and smile. I now stay there, and we engage, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. There are a lot of things being said that are just plain wrong. And that's not to say that all the guys at Dunkin' Donuts are wrong. It's just to say that, but I have, sometimes they are. We all are wrong sometimes. My wife says I need to learn to use the drive-through. It takes too long to get a cup of coffee. But the bottom line is this. We have to, the way you change things is we change things we begin in our own communities. We begin in the coffee shops. We begin, at our family functions. And we really cannot give up, because I'm going to tell you, I think we are at this is my own view. People might disagree. We're at a crossroads right now. And there's so much about this country that is good and honorable and incredible that I worry is at risk right now. And to be on the sidelines is to give up. To not vote is to give up. And, and it doesn't matter what your politics are. At this moment in our history, it is vitally important that people are engaged, that people vote, that people make sure their voices are heard.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
Now, we know the Russians are meddling in our voting.
Right.
How can we protect our votes
Yeah.
from this?
So the question is, we know the Russians are meddling in our voting system. How do we protect the votes? So we are trying to provide more assistance to states and communities to be able to monitor what's going on. I'm a big believer in paper ballots. I mean, you can't mess around with paper ballots. You can mess around with computers, but you can't mess around with paper ballots. We ought to make sure there's always paper ballots available. Right. But the Russians' involvement in our election is not just that. It's a little bit more kind of mischievous, right? I mean, those who are on social media, are getting notices, are seeing things pop up that are Russian-born, to trying to confuse you and trying to get you to think a certain way, and we ought to be cracking down on that. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. One of the problems we have is that the House of Representatives, has passed a bill that would provide states and cities and towns with more assistance to be able to combat that. Mitch McConnell in the Senate has refused to bring it up. He's under intense pressure now, because all of the intelligence agencies, even under President Trump, they're all saying the Russians are messing around, trying to interfere in this election again. So you got to do something. So hopefully the pressure will increase on him, where the Senate will actually do something. And let me just finally say this. I said your vote is sacred. Our election process is sacred. Nobody should mess around with our elections. It's our elections. The President of the United States should be who you vote for, not who the Russians want. The people who get elected to Congress ought to be who you vote for, not who Russia or China wants. And it is baffling to me that there is still some people who don't want to kind of admit what is so obvious, and that is that the Russians really enjoy the chaos that is produced by meddling in our elections. But the bottom line is they're doing it. And to me, that's an attack on our country. It's an attack on our democracy. And we need to be stronger in our response to them. And we, at a minimum, ought to be clear about, we know what you're doing, and we're watching it, and we have ways to stop it. So we ought to get serious. I mean, we have the next election is yet less than a year and a half away. We don't have a lot of time. But if you heard the president's own FBI director, Director Wray, he said they're already doing it. Already doing it. We need more urgency on that. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
I think, at least for me, he talked about the phone,
Right.
And the scams and how good they are. The Russians are like this. You're going to see stuff that looks really reasonable. this really real, or is it somebody else?
Yeah, and I agree. Again, going back to the robocall stuff. I mean, if you get a phone call, you know, I would provide no information over the telephone. I would check with people. You know, when someone calls, says, "Oh, you know, you won $1 million," you know, or you won a trip to Hawaii, right? It sounds too good to be true. It really is too good to be true. You know, they're trying to get information from you, your credit card numbers, your social security numbers, to be able to go in and to try to take whatever you have. And I think I mean, in my opinion, there's a special place in hell for those people who do that. But the bottom line is they are out there. And we have to be very, very, very vigilant. And that's why, again, the House passed this bill. Hopefully the Senate will. And we need to demand that our phone company, I mean, the phone companies have a role to play here, too. They ought to be more vigilant. But yesterday, during a period of 2 hours, I think I might have got about 4 or 5 of these robocalls that had numbers similar to those of my family. And it was all trying to sell me something, or that I'm about to be arrested because I owe the IRS money. I called back one time and I told them, I said, I want to know who you are. Give me your name and tell me where you're calling from. I said, I'm a member of the United States Congress. Give it to me, and they hung up immediately. But you know, when you trace these numbers, I mean, they may be offshore somewhere. So it may be a 508 or 774 or 413 number, and then the next thing you know, it's really coming out of halfway around the world. But we need to do more, and that's why, you know, I hope the Senate will take up our bill. We need to do more to protect people here at home, because most people here are honest. And I'll tell you, people also know amongst the senior citizen population, you are very good about paying your bills on time, right? I mean, you are always up to date, and you want to respond immediately. They know that, and so when they set off the alarm bells that maybe there's something that they try to tell you owe something that you don't, they're counting on you basically just to pay. And by the way, that's the same with insurance companies too. We've had Mary Pat Gibbons in my office in Worcester. We do a lot of casework on healthcare. You know, oftentimes people have, you know, supplemental insurance or private insurance, you know, will be given bills. Well, we find out later that the insurance should have covered them. But sometimes these insurance companies send you a bill anyway, figuring you will just pay it and won't question it. So again, that's kind of the for-profit nature of a lot of our health insurance industry, where people are, again, they're trying to make money. You pay, they make money, even if they're supposed to cover what they're asking you to pay for. Else? Anything else? Yeah. Okay. Anything else before I? Yes. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, and some of these healthcare plans that they're talking about, that's part of the addition to it. Now, some people have plans already that may cover some of this stuff, and that's why it's all, you know, whatever in question, you know, call my office or talk to somebody here, and we can help follow up. But look, you know, health insurance ought to cover dental. Health insurance ought to cover hearing. I mean, because those are essential, you know, I mean, we need to be able to, be able to see, hear, you know, be able to, you know, not suffer from dental pain. Those things all should be part of what insurance should cover. And again, you know, when we passed the Affordable Care Act, we added some things that we call essential benefits that require insurance companies to cover certain things, and we need to revisit that because, and the same thing with Medicare and Medicaid, we need to make sure that these are being responsive to some of the needs in our communities. You know, the issue of dental care is not just an issue that impacts senior citizens; it impacts young kids too. And you know, you talk to some school teachers. I have 2 sisters who are school teachers in the Worcester public school system, kids who don't go and get regular checkups, who are suffering from toothaches and tooth decay, they can't learn. They can't focus. And by the way, left unchecked, a toothache could turn into a major infection that actually could kill you. These aren't kind of luxury items. They are things that need to be part of our healthcare package.
I spoke a few weeks ago to a physical therapist who told me she goes to house, and she sees a lot of patients that are falling, and she believes in part it's because they don't have up-to-date eyeglasses.
Right.
They can't see what they're doing. So they're hitting things, they're falling. You can get heart attacks from having poor dental care.
Correct.
I mean, it seems like it's the obvious thing for Medicare to be picking this up.
Absolutely. The other thing I believe about healthcare is that nutrition needs to be a centerpiece of our healthcare system. There are a lot of people who develop health issues that are preventable had they been on a better diet. But we don't teach nutrition in our schools in this country. In fact, if you go to a medical school and you talk to students who are about to graduate, you ask them how many courses of nutrition have you taken? None. It was covered in a broader course. My grandmother used to say to me, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. It would annoy me. I wish she was still alive so I could say you were right. Bottom line, I co-chair the Food is Medicine Working Group. We can help prevent a lot of young people from developing high blood pressure, diabetes, or other things that lead to heart disease and chronic illnesses that last an entire lifetime if we pay more attention to nutrition. Senior citizens. Not everybody has access to senior centers, right? Not everybody, can depend on a nutritious meal on a daily basis. And those who don't end up having more difficulty in terms of their health care. And here's the deal. If we get this right, it helps people. It improves the quality of life for people. And here's another thing. It also lowers the amount of money we spend on health care. If I can prevent you from getting diabetes, if I can prevent you from high blood pressure or heart disease, that's good for you, but it's also, you cost a lot less. I don't know why we don't focus on this more. And so that's one of the areas that I think, that's one of the reasons why, as I began, I talked to you about my farm tour. That's one of the reasons why I think, it's so important to support our local farms, because quite frankly, what they grow and what they produce here is better for all of us. I'd rather buy a tomato grown in Uxbridge than one that has been flown across the country and halfway around the world. It was described to me what a tomato grown in Mexico goes through to get to a grocery store in Massachusetts. And I felt bad for the tomato because it's traumatic. Between the freezing and the polishing and the trucking and the train and I'd rather have a tomato and all the chemicals that go on it. We're better to buy local. Let me just close with this, and I'll stick around. People, yeah.
There's no increase next year. How is that determined? Why don't they have a fixed percentage every year?
Because there is a group in the Department of Labor that determines the cost of living, and they look at various things like inflation and other things. And as I said, we need to have a different we need to have a different calculation for people who are senior citizens, because the cost that they are looking at, would affect somebody more, who's in the workforce than it would somebody who's retired. It doesn't take into account additional health care costs, additional medication costs. So we need to understand that one glove doesn't fit all. But that's just the way it is. That's the way. There's a formula. This is not determined by Congress. There is a group that does this within our Department of Labor, and I don't think it reflects the true cost that senior citizens. Yeah. So. Well, yeah.
What about pre-existing conditions with insurance companies?
Yeah. So pre-existing conditions. Right now, an insurance company cannot discriminate against you if you have a pre-existing condition. That is the law. That is the law. That was what the Affordable Care Act did. We have some people right now, unfortunately, including the president, who are going to court to try to overturn the Affordable Care Act, which would take that away. And let me tell you something. In some states, being a woman was a pre-existing condition. If you had given birth to a child, that's a pre-existing condition. And you would end up having to pay more for your insurance. That's just wrong, right? But that was the way it was. And you know, I visited Memorial Hospital a few months ago. I went to the the NICU unit, where the neonatal unit with all the new babies coming, that have just been born, and I met a bunch of parents who were saying to me, modern medicine is incredible. My son had a minor issue with his heart. They were able to fix it. He's going to have a great life. But this one parent said to me, but now he has a pre-existing condition. And I'll be able to keep him on my insurance until he's 26 years old. But after that, if they do away with pre-existing condition protections, he's never going to be able to afford insurance because it'll be too expensive. No insurance company is going to want to cover you if you have a pre-existing condition because you potentially might cost them more. And he says, I'm really, really nervous that something's going to happen where these protections are going to be taken away. And so right now, there's a court case going on. I hope it decides that they should respect the law of the country, of the land, which says that pre-existing conditions need to be protected. But this is an issue that people need to pay attention to. When politicians talk to you about their health care plans and they talk about, changing the system in a way that will remove these essential benefit protections, like, pre-existing conditions, that should set off all kinds of alarm bells. Because, pre-existing conditions are not just people who have major health care problems. They can be little things. Like I said, in many states, being a woman, ever having had a child is a pre-existing condition. That is nuts. And, you should not be paying more for your insurance because you had a child. And yet that is one of the things that, that is at stake. So right now, it is part of the law. People are protected. Depending on what happens in this court case in Texas, depending on what happens, I think in the next election, some of these issues could be in jeopardy, and we have to be concerned about those things. Let me just close, and I'm happy to stick around by saying this. Look, we live in a country where people have all kinds of viewpoints and believe all kinds of things, and that's what makes us really unique. I mean, even within our families, you can have people whose politics are, polar opposites. That's fine. What makes this country great is the fact that we have the freedom of speech, and we could be whoever we want, we could vote for whoever we want, right? But here's my plea. We have to return to decency. I mean, there has to be, no matter what your politics are, there has to be a return to decency. Because things are getting a little bit out of control. And, we can disagree politically, but I still can respect you and you can respect me. You can vote for somebody else. And I still will respect you for your vote. I'll be sad you didn't vote for me, but I still respect you for your vote. And hopefully you respect me for, wanting to get out there and give you my position. But we're getting to a point where it's becoming so polarized that people can't even be in the same room together and have intelligent conversations about things or even disagree and still be friends. And we have to watch our language, and that includes people in Washington. That includes the president, right? Because I'm going to tell you something. My parents raised me to believe that everybody should be treated with respect. And I raised my kids to believe that too. And if I told my kids that everybody is important, that nobody should be bullied, that nobody should be called names, and I think we're moving away from that. And that's not a Democratic or Republican thing. That's just we're all good, decent people. That's the way you raise your kids. That's the way decency should not be sacrificed in this big political debate we're having right now. And I feel very, very strongly about that. I have some very good friends of mine in Congress who I respect very much, who think totally different than I do, who are conservative Republicans. But I admire them. I admire their patriotism. I admire the fact that they felt strongly enough to run for Congress and to get out there and fight for what they believe. And I hope they feel the same way about me. You know, I would never think of denigrating them personally because of their beliefs, and I hope they would never feel the same way about me. But yet too many people are going down that road. You listen to talk radio, you follow social media, you know, I mean, you listen to the news, people are saying things that, quite frankly, you know, if I said those things, my mother would give me a timeout. I got to tell you, even now when I'm on the House floor debating, sometimes I look at my phone, my mother will say, Jimmy, you know, be careful. And I'm always thinking of her. Right, well, yeah, my mother probably do worse to me, right? So, but I think of that, I every time, you know, things I want to, you know, sometimes when people say things, you want to respond in turn. Every time I think about doing that, I think, what will my mother say, right? And she's watching, and she's never shy about telling me what she thinks. But I just say that because I think locally there's still this decency that exists here. I don't want it to be corrupted by what's happening on the national scene. So, look, I appreciate you having me here today. I'll stick around if anybody has any more questions or comments. Mary Pat, you know, any casework, she's happy to handle. But I thank you very much for having me here today and look forward to seeing you again soon. All the best.